Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Chartered Accountants Ulster Society's webinar on skills and apprenticeships. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason McIntosh, and I am the convener of the Chartered Accountants and Business Subcommittee of the Ulster Society. The subcommittee aims to ensure that the Society remains relevant for and supportive to Chartered Accountants working in business. We aim to do this through a calendar of relevant events and content for our members, both informative and networking in nature, although often our events are relevant for wider Society members as well. Over the past number of years, we have engaged regularly with members via webinars, and despite a welcome return to face-to-face events in our calendar, we do still intend to continue the online webinar style event going forward. And further information on our next online event, which is a collaboration with both the public sector and the member services subcommittees, will follow in the coming weeks. I would encourage you to keep an eye on emails and newsletter content from the Institute to make sure you keep up to date with our events as and when they happen. After the event today, you will receive a request for feedback, and I would very much welcome the opportunity to hear feedback both on today's event and also on our calendar of events more generally, either by filling out that feedback request or by getting in touch with me directly. Without further ado, let's move on to the content of today's webinar. We have over 100 registered to attend today, which I think shows the high level of interest both in the topic and in the speakers that we are lucky to be joined by this afternoon. I am delighted to be joined by Gareth Hetherington and Richard Kirk today as we discuss skills, the balance between talent, supply and demand, and hear about the options open to employers to address supply challenges. Gareth is going to discuss the findings from the latest NI Skills Barometer research produced by the Ulster University Economic Policy Centre. This will include an overview of some key supply-side issues facing the labour market, likely demand for skills across sectors, and the imbalance between supply and demand. And Richard will outline initiatives used by employers to address talent supply challenges, with a particular focus on entry-level initiatives, including work experience and apprenticeships. I would now like to briefly introduce both our speakers before we begin. Gareth Hetherington is Director of the Ulster University Economic Policy Centre. The Centre carries out a broad range of economic policy-focused research to inform government on key policy and strategic decisions. The Centre is currently working with central government in the areas of labour market research, skills development and competitiveness, and with local government and community planning and economic development strategies. Gareth provides regular economic commentary in the media and is often invited to provide evidence to storming committees on economic development policy in areas such as non-domestic rates and mitigation measures against the impact of COVID. Gareth is also a member of the Northern Ireland Skills Council. He is a governor of the South Eastern Regional College and has recently been appointed as a council member of the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Our second speaker is Richard Kirk from Workplus. Richard is passionate about helping employers grow their future talent through apprenticeships. Having worked with employers, schools, parents, and pupils since 2014, Richard started Workplus to make it easier for people to find apprenticeships. Workplus is a membership network in which employers can share knowledge, best practice, and be offered training and mentoring. Through the Workplus platform, employers join forces, making it easier for candidates as they have a single point where they can apply to multiple apprenticeships. Richard is a fellow of ICE and holds an MBA from Queen's University Belfast. He was a member of the Department for the Economy's Skills Strategy Advisory Group, and in 2019 led a government review of apprenticeship, marketing, and communication in Northern Ireland. In 2021, he represented the Institute of Directors on the NI Executives Review of Education panel. So to make our session as interactive as possible today, I would encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A function on Zoom as our speakers cover their content. Rather than cover your questions after each speaker, we will collate these and put them to both Gareth and Richard in a panel-style discussion at the end. And finally, I want to remind you that this session is being recorded and will be made available to members later. With that, I'd now like to thank Gareth for joining us and hand over to him for his presentation.
Thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be back presenting to the Chartered Accountants again. I have to say, in terms of the vast majority of the research that we've done over the last year, I've been talking to a lot of businesses, and skills is consistently the #1 issue that businesses raise. And so from our perspective, then the skills research that we've done, I think is particularly relevant. So I'm going to do that, and then Richard, as Jason said, Richard then will talk after me, and he'll provide some of the solutions to maybe some of the challenges that I've identified. So I'm just going to bring my slides up here. So hopefully that comes up. Can you see the slides now?
You can see them, Gareth, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, the Skills Barometer research that you referenced, or that Jason referenced, is a piece of work that we've been doing for the department now for 6 or 7 years, and the last iteration we did was published just last year, and it looks at both supply and demand. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the supply side in the first instance. So the first point I would make is around demographics, and the demographics really are not on our side. The chart that I have here on the left, this is the change in the working age population, so those aged 16 to 64. And the problems and the challenges that we have faced and businesses have faced accessing labour have been brewing for some time here. And what we can see in the 1980s, the working age population increased by over 70,000. In the 90s, it increased by over 80,000. And then in the 2000s, increased again by over 100,000. So it's about 270,000 increase in the working age population over this 30-year period. However, in the 2010s, it increased by just 15,000. And it's going to basically flatline in the 2020s. So, and this chart here on the right, this shows the number of national insurance number applications from non-UK nationals to Northern Ireland. Now we can see it's fallen very sharply in 2021. That's obviously COVID related. But if we are going to be able to continue to grow, and we want to continue to grow our working age population, then we need to take a different attitude towards inwards migration, because the demographics of the population aren't working for us. So that's the first point, and that's just a number of people issue. The second point then I would make, so this just looks at the numbers of school leavers, and a bit of an issue more recently around grade inflation. So that chart on the left then shows the percentage, going back around 20 years to 03-04, shows the percentage of young people leaving school with 5 or more GCSEs, including English and Maths. It was only 50% in 2003-04. But a lot of progress has been made over the last 20 years. And we can see that in 2019-20, there was a bit of a jump up around 76%. Now this here jump up was the first year of teacher assessed grades as a result of COVID. And as we know, teachers were probably a little bit more generous than would have been attained if young people had to sit those exams. But nevertheless, for GCSEs, the increase that we're seeing is broadly in line with the significant uptrend that we've seen over the last 20 years. The chart on the right here, though, is A-levels. And what we can see here, this is the percentage of pupils leaving school with 3 or more A-levels at A star to C. And we can see it went from 40% in 2018-19 to 52% in 2019-20. So teacher assessed grades had a much bigger impact in A-levels than it did in GCSEs. Now that's had a number of knock-on implications in the labour market. One, it's meant that more young people have stayed on in education longer, which in the long term is good. We want young people to stay in education longer, but that actually reduces the number that have moved into the labour market now. So it creates a bit of a contraction right now. And it also raises some issues in tertiary education, where some people perhaps who would have moved straight into the labour market have found themselves going perhaps into whether it's higher education or further education, and they're perhaps just not best placed to have all the skills that perhaps students in previous years would have had. So that's school leavers, point on school leavers. In terms of FE then, the numbers coming out of FE have been falling now for the last decade. Primarily, we can see here, so this dark blue in the chart on the left, or chart on the right, sorry, these are young people with below level 2 qualifications. That's fallen quite significantly. And then this is the numbers of people with a level 2 qualification. You can see the numbers there have also fallen. Now that's not a surprise when we look at the previous chart, where obviously more young people are leaving school with 5 or more GCSEs. So therefore there's less for the FE sector to pick up. But FE is still working primarily in delivering qualifications at level 2 and 3, less so in level 4 and 5, and that's going to be a bit of an issue, which we'll get to shortly. And then moving into HE, so this just looks at the supply side from HE. We can see that these are the broad subject areas where people are qualifying. So subjects allied to medicine is the biggest in Northern Ireland, and that includes nursing, it includes pharmacy, physio, ophthalmics, those types of qualifications. It's not doctors and it's not doctors and dentists. Doctors and dentists are down here, medicine and dentistry. So you have subjects allied to medicine, you have business, social sciences are the top 3, and you can see that much greater than some of the other sciences, for example, down here. Now this here chart on the right hand side, so that looks at the change in provision or supply in higher education from 2014-15. Now we looked at 2014-15 because that was the first year that we did the Skills Barometer research, and we wanted to see if the information that we were putting out in the Skills Barometer research was changing behaviours. And a couple of things that the first Skills Barometer research showed was, one, we had an oversupply of people doing teaching qualifications, and we can see that there's been a reduction there, so that's good. And then we can see that there was, and the other finding, sorry, in the initial skills was there was an undersupply of STEM, and so we can see quite a significant increase here in computer science, so that's a positive. The subjects allied to medicine also increased significantly. Nursing was a very undersupplied degree, so that's all positive. But I suppose one of the disappointing things is a lot of the other sciences where we had significant undersupplies has been very little change. So engineering and technology, it's actually a very small reduction, and then some of the other sciences, very limited increase. So in terms of meeting the skills moving forward that the economy needs, I think we still need to look at provision and supply. This looks then at so the graduate brain drain. I suppose the general narrative is that too many of our young people leave Northern Ireland and go and study across the water, and I suppose when we look at the numbers, it only partially supports that argument. What we can see from the chart on the left is, so in Northern Ireland, so of Northern Ireland born young people who want to go on or who go on to study in HE, 72% do so in Northern Ireland, okay? That's the second highest retention rate of all 12 UK regions. Scotland's higher again. That's not surprising because Scotland, there's zero tuition fees for Scottish students studying in Scotland. So you need a really good reason to go overseas or to leave Scotland. And that number there, that 72% would probably be higher if there wasn't the Mazen cap. So that's the cap on HE, Northern Ireland HE students studying locally, because of that's a cap put in place by Stormont because of budget constraints. But we can see that Northern Ireland has a healthy retention rate relative to other regions in the UK. And then after graduation as well, so this looks at the number of NI born graduates, irrespective of where they studied, whether they studied here in Northern Ireland or across the water. NI born graduates, 80% of them are working in Northern Ireland after they've graduated. That, again, that's the second highest retention rate in the UK. So there's an argument, a strong argument, that said Northern Ireland specifically doesn't necessarily have a brain drain problem. Where it does have a much bigger problem is in attracting inflow. And what we can see here is only 6% of people studying in Northern Ireland as undergraduates come from another region in the UK. That is by far the lowest of all the regions. So when you put the inflow and outflow together, we've quite a large net outflow. But Northern Ireland needs to become much better at attracting, I was going to say, well, young people to come here and study, but people generally to come here and work. And obviously there's a role for us in universities to try to resolve that problem. But I think there's a wider societal point that we would want to make as well. Young people generally are turned off Northern Ireland, not because of our universities, but because of the wider historical issues that they associate with Northern Ireland. So that's something that we as a society need to work hard to attract more people to. So those are some of the issues on the supply side. On the demand side, then, we're seeing a changing skills mix in the economy. And this goes back again around 20 years. This is the proportion of the people in employment who have a level 6 qualification or above, so that's a degree level qualification. And that's been in a long-term uptrend for the last 20 years. This here's the corollary. This is the people with below level 2 qualifications. And we see that that's halved. It's fallen from 30% down to 15%. Now, there's a number of factors at play here. One, there's sort of generational impact, where you have young people entering the labour market, and young people tend to have higher levels of qualifications, and you have older people leaving the labour market, and they tend to have lower levels of formal qualifications. So that's just a trend that is pushing those numbers up. Also, we've got a sectoral mix change that's going on. So sectors such as agriculture, for example, which tends to employ people with lower level qualifications, it's getting relatively smaller. But you also have other sectors such as professional services and IT growing strongly in Northern Ireland, and they tend to employ people with higher level qualifications. So that's really driving strong demand for skills. But there's also clearly a COVID factor at play here, where in those last 2 years, there was a significant increase in higher skills and a reduction in people with lower skills. So that the pandemic put an increased premium and demand for people with higher levels of qualifications. And that's also reflected in the numbers of hours worked. So again, this chart goes back to 1997, the grey line. So this is level 4 and above. So this is all tertiary level qualifications, right up to PhD, postdoc, etc. Long-term uptrend, but we can see the number of hours really ticked up in 2020 and 2021. And then for levels 2 and 3 and below level 2, we saw a significant reduction. So COVID had a very significant impact on the demand for skills. Now, another thing that we looked at, and this is from our Skills Barometer research, looking out over the next sort of 10-year period, we looked at the demand across sectors. And what we can see, so we're expecting, if the economy grows as we have forecast, then on average over the next 10 years, 28,000, 29,000 people will be required per annum to move into the labour market. And these are the sectors where we think it's going to grow. So health is the biggest, retail, manufacturing, and professional services. But that's split between what we call replacement demand. So these are the dark blue components. So this is basically people leaving, people retiring, they need replaced. And then we've got this other component called expansion demand. So retail is a very large employer in the economy, but we're not forecasting significant growth. So expansion demand is going to be quite small, and that's not surprising given the challenges the retail sector are facing. But because just the size of the sector and the number of people it employs, there will be a lot of people leaving that sector, and they will need replaced. So if we compare the expansion demand in retail, for example, with professional services, that's going to see much greater growth, but less people leaving that sector. So overall, the number is smaller, but the skills profile for people in retail is different, obviously, from the skills profile of people in professional services. When we look at the demand then by skills level, so level 6, this is degree, 37% of people entering the labour market from education and the jobs that are arising will require a degree level qualification. This is getting bigger. Each time we do this research, that proportion gets bigger. And then down here, the people with below level 2 qualifications, that's getting smaller. So that's only 8% of jobs, only 8% of the 29,000 will be for people with low or no qualifications, and that's reducing. So even though we've made fantastic progress in increasing the number of young people leaving education with low or no qualifications, there's still 25% not getting level 2. So we really need to close that gap. Whenever we then bring this sort of supply and demand together, we're seeing an undersupply at all the higher skill levels, but in particular levels 3, 4, and 5. And that's where some of the apprenticeship work that the department are doing, and obviously Richard's involved in, really comes into play there. So that, and then at degree level, we're seeing again large net undersupply, and it's very much in the STEM related subjects, along with creative arts. Education still a bit of an over supply, but much lower than we'd seen before. Social studies, ironically, is now has the largest oversupply. Economics is included in that. So yeah, chastening for all of us. But okay, so I have then a couple of slides, a bit of a plug for some of the work that we're doing here in UU. This slide here sets out I suppose the higher level, some of the higher level apprenticeship programs and executive education programs that we've developed in partnership with a number of companies and the likes of yourselves in the chartered accountancy profession in Northern Ireland. And so it covers a lot of the areas, particularly in around finance, technology, and other customer ops here too. And then in this slide, I've included some links that give more detail to some of those degree apprenticeships. Now, I think Danielle McWall might be on the might be in the meeting. Danielle, do you want to say a few words? Danielle's one. I should introduce Danielle. Danielle's head of the Department of Accounting, Finance and Economics in the business school, and she's also one of your flocks. She's a chartered accountant. So Danielle, do you want to say just, is there anything else you'd like to add on this?
No, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, gotcha, yeah. Great.
No, Gareth, yes, I'm very close to Chartered Accountants Ireland and its members, and previously worked in practice. So we've developed a lot of these programs. You know, we've co-created them with employers and with professional bodies to make sure that they are fit for purpose. Very, very successful. I think we were the first to pilot the higher level degree apprenticeship, and that was the business technology, which we piloted with Deloitte, but that's now an open program. So any firm can join that program now, and the funding's available from the department for you to put your people through. That actually gets the students, most of these will get the students through their degree in 4 years, which is unheard of really. Normally HLA, it would be 4.5 years to 5 years, but it's 4 years. We've managed to make sure that they aren't any longer than a degree plus a placement year. So they're very, very popular with the students. And it's really just to make sure that employers are aware of them. So there's the accounting with management, which gets the same professional exemptions from Chartered Accountants Ireland as the normal BSc accounting degree gets, the accounting pathways degree. And then there are other, you know, the fast track to accounting, that postgraduate diploma, not a HLA, but it does. In 1 year, the students will get the same exemptions that a 3-year accounting degree would get them from Chartered Accountants Ireland. So they'd be the key ones. And then we have like the fintech. So if you are, you know, branching into that area, there's the fintech HLA has just started, where the students are in their we're into the third cohort of them now. So there's lots of, I suppose it is with accounting, there's so many routes that a student can take, but it's useful for the employers to be aware of what's out there. And Richard will be giving you even more information, I would imagine, on some of these opportunities. So so I know it's very tricky sometimes to get the graduates coming out. So it's looking at these other alternatives where you have the graduates captured before they hit their education journey or their further higher education journey. I don't know if that's helpful,
perfect.
but that's...
That's perfect, Danielle. Thank you. And Karen's going to make these slides available to everyone. So there's the links here that you can access. There's also a video. I'm not going to play this now. That Jackie Henry from Deloitte extolling the virtues of some of the courses that Danielle was talking about. Okay, I'm going to round off now just with a couple of very final remarks. On the supply side, we tend to think very much of young people leaving education and that sort of 16 to 21, 22 age group. I think if we're going to solve our skills problems and given the extent of them, we need to upskill and reskill people who are currently in the labour market and those who are economically inactive. We also need to make Northern Ireland more attractive to talent. Obviously, if we can attract more young people to study here, that's great. But also in terms of getting more people to come here just to want to live and work is still a bit of a challenge for us. And as I said before, that's a wider societal point. What's really important as well, I think, is independent careers advice to ensure that, I suppose, young people are making the decisions aligned to what the labour market needs. That doesn't always happen, and young people aren't necessarily making decisions with all of the information to hand. So those are some of the things on the supply side. On the demand side, I think we need to recognise the importance of replacement demand. There is a tendency to focus on which sectors are growing fastest, and those are the only places where you can get jobs, and that's not necessarily true. There will always be replacement demand, particularly in large sectors. What we call transversal skills are sometimes just as important as qualifications. I heard a great line. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and they said that it was this employer. I'm not going to name him, obviously, but he said, we used to recruit based on skills and fire based on attitude. So if their attitude didn't match up, then they would struggle to stay with the organization. He says we've changed that now. We now hire based on attitude, and we teach them the skills we need. So skills and those other transversal skills are critically important. That's a pedagogical issue for us that we need to work on in universities, and we're doing that in the way in which we teach our students. But also work placement is critically important in developing those broader skills. And then the final point then is that the missing middle, as we refer to, and that's about perhaps encouraging young people who would have left education at level 2 or perhaps even below, encouraging them to stay in education longer to achieve those mid-level vocational qualifications that are in high demand and one of the most undersupplied areas that we have identified in our research. So folks, that concludes my presentation, and thank you, Danielle, for your input there too. I'm going to hand over now to Richard, if you want to take it from here, Richard, and talk about the good work you're doing.
Gareth, thanks very much for that warm introduction, and it's great to be with you all today. We should all be very grateful that we have economists like Gareth, because quite often economics can be a very dry subject, but Gareth really brings it to life and makes what can seemingly be bamboozling and very understandable for us all. So I'm really grateful for the way in which this session's been set up today. What I'd like to really do is to probably take some of the themes that Gareth has presented and help us think about how, as organisations, we might grow our own talent across all sectors, but thinking particularly today about the accounting profession. Gareth referred to supply and demand quite a lot today, and I guess the way I've often looked at the work that we're doing with Workplus is really two funnels on either side, and trying to help people connect in that bow tie right in the middle, and how can we help that happen, both on the supply side for citizens and on the demand side for the employers that we work with. So let's start with that demand side. Gareth mentioned the challenges not just with expansion, but replacement, transversal skills, and the missing middle as well. So we'll think about some potential solutions to those areas. And we'll also think about the supply side, about that idea of upskilling and reskilling, making Northern Ireland attractive to talent, and also that independent careers advisory services. So if you've been following the news this morning at all, you'll have seen that skills and apprenticeships are high on the agenda. King Charles made an appearance on the repair shop and was really lamenting at the fact that so many of the craft apprenticeships, like plumbing, carpentry, joinery, hair and beauty, those sort of apprenticeships that we would probably think of are dying away. In Northern Ireland, that's kind of far from the reality. There are an awful lot of great apprenticeships available in those areas, but we definitely love to see apprentices in those areas using their hands and their craft. But what about the knowledge economy? What about those that are like accountants and engineers, fintech, software engineers that are using their head as well as their hands to develop products and services? Apprenticeships can also be for them as well. And then you may also have noticed, sorry, didn't do that properly, but you may have also noticed today as well that Adele has talked about going back to university to take an English degree. So the apprenticeship concept, we often think of it being a school leaver, someone who has maybe not done very well in their qualifications and then goes to an apprenticeship as a fallback option. But I think what we've heard today from Gareth and from Danielle, and many of you will have experience of this, actually it's a great way for someone to retrain from a career. Now, unfortunately, Adele is going back to university full time, but wouldn't it be great if she was doing an apprenticeship in something like fintech or software development? So how is Workplus working in these areas? I've been in this space since 2014, and really my inspiration around the apprenticeship space really came from one of our politicians. I know, inspired by a politician. Do you remember those days? Well, it was Stephen Farry who stood up in the Assembly in 2014, and he and his department had done research into international best practice around apprenticeships. And really what he found were three things. The three things that are the hallmark of a wonderful apprenticeship system globally. First of all, it must be employer-led. Second of all, the primary focus should be the employer and the aspiring apprentice, whatever age that aspiring apprentice is. And thirdly, you must create an online platform like a UCAS for apprenticeships. So those were Stephen's words. And I took those very seriously and thought, well, here's the international best practice. How might we do that here in Northern Ireland? And that was really the genesis of Workplus. Since that time, we're not just working in the apprenticeship space, we're also now branching out to help employers, schools and pupils to coordinate work experience whilst they're still at schools. And that picks up on some of the transversal skills issues that Gareth mentioned earlier. So we'll have a think about that. So what we've done is we're working on a pilot project at the minute with Wallace High School for their year 12 pupils. So this is before they make their post-GCSE choices. And rather than work experience being something where your mom or dad knows somebody and you get in the door through that way, this is making it more inclusive, and it's about developing the transversal skills that you can see on the screen. It's less about what subjects you need to get into that industry, more how is communication, creativity and teamwork and problem solving, how is it needed in that sector? And actually helping the young people to say, well, I'm in my choir, I'm in my youth group, I'm in a rugby team, I'm in a hockey team. I'm developing lots of these skills already. So it's not just saying you need a qualification to get into these jobs. Yes, you do need a qualification to get in to college courses, university courses, but it's more about the skills that are needed. And that point has been made already by Gareth as well. So that's a project that we're working with Wallace on. That's for their year 12, which is a 180 pupil year group. And they're actually out right in the middle of this week at different employers that we're working with, 35 employers that are taking those young people on. And we look forward to evaluating that over the coming weeks. But the challenge for employers can be that on this demand side, there are lots of skills products, if we call them that, traineeship, apprenticeship, internship, placements, graduates, assured skills, job start, to name but a few. And it can feel like a bit of a jumble sale. Many of those employers that we've referred to already and Gareth referred to are larger organisations, the likes of Deloitte and PwC. And they have the critical mass here to be able to develop programs. And as Danielle mentioned, that's now an open program, which is great. But most employers here, 98%, have less than 50 employees. And whenever you've that sort of size, if you're in that sort of experience, I experienced this as a micro business owner, it's hard to lift your head up and to engage with all those skills products. It can feel like a jumble sale at times. So those entry-level pathways, well, what are they? What are these entry levels that folks can come into organizations through? Well, we mentioned work experience. That's a great way for young people. But actually, people of all ages can engage in what are called traineeships, which is a program which is 4 days in college and then 1 day in work. And that could lead on to an apprenticeship and then becoming a regular employee. You could go straight from school or change your career to become an apprentice. And as Danielle has mentioned, some of them are 4 years, some are shorter, some are longer, and that can take you into becoming a regular employee afterwards. But the important bit about an apprenticeship is it's a job from the start. It's not like another training program or an employability program. If someone does do a full-time college or university qualification, they may come out on an internship or a placement year. And as Gareth alluded to, that's a really important year where they can develop those work-ready skills and transversal skills. Become a graduate. Then we have the Assured Skills Programme, which is for organisations to use to try and bring folks who maybe don't have the right degree qualification, but they can retrain through the Assured Skills Programme. Or if they've done a degree which matches to the employer's needs, they could go straight into that role as a regular employee. And then other employability schemes, the likes of Princess Trust, NIACRO programmes, Women's Tech, Bites Project, Now Group, there are these employability schemes which give people a short intervention and give them a taster of work, and they can become a regular employee. So there's a lot going on in this space. So let's think about apprenticeships for a second. Well, what does it actually mean? Well, it's about not having to wait until they graduate, until you can recruit. And that's whether they've left school or it's someone changing their career and coming in at any stage of life. They can also then be shaped by you to suit the business. And as we've alluded to already, the government picks up the fees for the college course, and also importantly, you save on national insurance contributions if they're under 25. So that's 15% saving on your total employment costs for that individual compared to a regular member of your team. And as Danielle's alluded to, you can help colleges and universities shape curriculum which is relevant for this current age and for the future development of your industry. So an apprenticeship is a job. The employer pays a salary. It's typically an 80-20 split, so typically 4 days in work, 1 day in off-the-job training. Mentioned already about the savings on national insurance, and there are these variety of entry-level and progression pathways. And it's not just for new people coming into your organisation. You can use an apprenticeship to develop someone who's already in your team. So that's an option for you as well. So let's think about these qualification levels, because we don't really talk in levels. But down the left-hand side is really the common skill level, qualification level, sorry, which can be applied across a number of different qualification products. So we think about these levels. Where do apprenticeships come into this? Well, the green dotted area are the more traditional apprenticeships, the ones I mentioned earlier: plumbing, hair and beauty, motor vehicle, and retail, and carpentry. Those are the traditional apprenticeship areas, and there are about 100 pathways that can be chosen in that area. And there's actually a proposal in place which DFE announced a few weeks ago to say that they want to open that up to people of all ages to do those entry-level apprenticeships. And again, that's another great way of retraining our people into the right sectoral areas where there's economic growth potential. And then the higher level apprenticeships, which came in from about 2015, and they're for anyone of any age to do right up to a master's degree level. There are no PhD ones just yet, but it's in the policy, so there may be at some point. So some examples that are out there, there are 150 different pathways in total whenever you include apprenticeships NI and the higher level apprenticeships. And in this space, you can see that there are a variety. So if you're an accountant in-house within a manufacturing business, actually it may be that you have a visibility across the business to bring in other types of apprentices as well. You can see the variety that are there. And then the accounting areas, there are accounting assistant apprenticeships at level 2, level 3. accounting technician, which is the Accounting Technicians Ireland qualification at level 5. And then Ulster University has a degree level in accounting with management. And again, that goes significant way to helping with chartered accountant exams as well. So from our perspective, Workplus is an integrator where we help the collaboration in the apprenticeship system, primarily between the employer and the aspiring apprentice, as I alluded to whenever Stephen Farry made his speech. So that's our primary focus, helping employers understand what apprenticeships are and all these other skills products, and then helping them to reach out and find those aspiring apprentices. Obviously with the support of likes of government and training providers as well, but the main show here are the employers and the aspiring apprentices. And we do a significant amount of work with other organisations like schools, job centres, employability organisations to help people move from those areas into jobs with organisations as apprentices. So we started in 2019 and we're now supporting a network of just over 60 companies. And there's a good variety of size of business as well. We've got some micro businesses, we've got small businesses, medium and then large as well. And over the last number of years, we've helped 400 apprentices into positions. And what's really encouraging, and the HR teams and MDs and FDs love this, is the retention of apprentices. They're very, very sticky, you know, they tend to want to stick with the business. They're not moving on very quickly. So 95% of those apprentices have been retained in the business. And then during COVID, we delivered a project for the Department for the Economy under their Challenge Fund to create an apprenticeship marketplace project. And we'll await the outcome of that project. So these are 6 of the 60 that we're working with that are thinking about accounting apprenticeships within their businesses. And you can see here, one's in practice with Muldoon, but the others are out in industry. AIB will be familiar to you. Black Box manufactures and fits out gyms with professional sports teams across the world. Graham, our construction business, NIE, you'll know as well. And Options Technology, our fintech business that are bringing in apprentice accountants to their team as well. So I was at an event a couple of months ago and Gordon Parks, the director of HR at NIE, spoke. And he talked a lot about the apprenticeship program that they developed at NIE. And he said that for him, it was like growing his own tomatoes. Now, it's a bit random to have this. Maybe it's, you know, feeling a bit peckish over lunchtime. But Gordon talked about how getting the conditions right to grow his own tomatoes was work at the start, but nothing tasted the same than his homegrown tomatoes. And I used the same illustration whenever it comes to an apprentice. So as NIE, as a business, we're working alongside them, helping them to look at all the apprenticeship pathways in their business, putting the groundwork in place, creating the culture, fertile ground for apprentices to come in and flourish. And that's what we're doing now with NIE and many other businesses. And actually, it tastes much better than any other pathway. But at Workplus, we're not coming and building a greenhouse in your back garden where you can just grow your own by yourself. We're actually inviting you to become part of an allotment. So the 60 businesses that we're working with are part of a network. They're sharing ideas about how to set up this environment and culture. They're sharing ideas about how to mentor the apprentices once they're in place. And they're developing new pathways. New apprenticeship pathways are being created. So it's really exciting to be in that space. And they can encourage each other and get alongside each other. Even direct competitors in the commercial market are working together around the apprenticeship space through Workplus. We've heard this year in particular, most businesses saying we really need to start growing our own. So we've called our campaign for this autumn, Grow Your Own. And it's really to help businesses to see how other businesses have started to grow their own talent through apprenticeships. Combo is in the black t-shirt there on the right-hand side, and he was a taxi driver, 42 years old, originally from Zimbabwe. He has been here for 20 years, has a family, and was working as a taxi driver, working long hours to support his family. And he actually was taking someone to the airport one day, and the person got in a bit of a rush and said, oh, I've got to go quickly, can you get me there as quickly as possible? And Combo then started to weave through the streets and found a brilliant route to go through. And the guy said to him, well, yeah, why are you doing this? Like, you're really smart. You know, you can see the way you're thinking and working this out. I'm the CEO of a tech company. Why have you never thought about software engineering? And Combo was like, well, I've never really thought about that, you know. And I planted a seed with him. And Combo then, within a number of months, applied for a part-time course. And now he applied for an apprenticeship with Automated Intelligence, a software company based on a Catalyst. And for him, it was wanting to do something with his life. He knew that he was capable, but he wanted to do something more. And actually, as a career changer, to move from a job, whether it's in retail, hospitality, whatever sector, to move into accounting or software engineering, we need to be very careful about our language around apprenticeships. Many apprenticeships are called school leaver programs, which is helpful because a lot of apprentices will be school leavers, but it may rule out some of these great talented people. And actually for Combo, the apprenticeship was a perfect way to move because he was able to stay in his job as a taxi driver until he got his apprenticeship, and he got paid from day one on that apprenticeship, rather than going on and doing a degree by himself, getting educational maintenance, having to provide for his family. He actually got in based on his skills and his abilities, and now he's getting the qualification while he does that. And we've been working with Sarah and the team at Muldoon, and again, Sarah is just so excited about developing talent, giving them a really good, clear path into the accounting profession after that secondary education. And then finally, last week, we spoke to Andrew Trimble of Kairos. So Andrew's developed a sports scheduling platform for professional sports teams across the world, international rugby teams, Man United, Liverpool, NFL teams. And they've brought apprentices in, 3 female apprentices at the age of 18. And this was one of the lines that he had was, they've been a breath of fresh air and they're adding value from day one. So for our young people across Ireland then, well, there was a survey done of them, and it asked them, what would be a successful life for you? What would be the hallmark of it? And you can see here the top line is making a difference in my community. And I think whether it's an apprenticeship or another program or your engagement with schools as accounting professionals, I would encourage you to consider that whenever you're thinking about how you make the accountancy sector attractive. I was a civil engineer in a previous career and then worked for ICE, which is the membership body for civil engineers, which is similar to Chartered Accountants Ireland. And in that role, we were about demonstrating to young people and the public at large, really how civil engineers improve your life. And that may feel like an overstatement, but the reality is that as professionals, you don't need to be a doctor or a dentist or a physio to make people's lives better. You can do that in whatever sector you're in, and it's communicating that narrative. Now, Darren McDowell shared this, and it made me laugh because whether you're a civil engineer, chartered accountant, or whatever, no one ever runs around a playground playing like that. But what the really important part is that as you engage with whether it's young people or career changers, it's really about the why. It's how you make them feel about the sector, and how they can make a difference in other people's lives as they join in with what you're doing. And I think this quote from Maya Angelou really sums that up very well. Just as I finish, I want to use an example from outside accounting, outside civil engineering, and outside apprenticeships. So, but if we were to talk about our industries or even the pathways in, and like we talk about this product in terms of the what it is, well, I could say this is a woven, fire retardant, load-bearing harness that transfers load from a secondary user to a primary user, and the secondary user cannot be more than 35 kilograms. It's CE certified. It comes in pink or blue. You know, it's not really telling the story. I took 60 seconds of your day to tell you what it is, and really you're none the wiser. But you don't need long, do you, now? Whenever you understand not what it is, but what it does. And I think for all of us, as we try to inspire our next generation, whether it's of school leavers or career changers, let's think about the impact and the purpose of what we're doing. So the previous slide showed you a product called the Upsy, which is manufactured by James Leckie Design in Lisburn. And it was born out of frustration of a mother whose son had cerebral palsy. and the doctor said he'll never walk. And she went home and she started to make the very first walking harness. And then she met James Leckie. It started to be mass produced. It's now sold across the world. And children who weren't able to support their own body weight through their legs because of the lack of muscle definition are now able to develop muscle as the parents take the weight initially, and then over time slowly give more of the weight of the child onto their own legs, and they walk with the shared sandal. But it's not even just a physiological product. You look at the smile on that young girl's face. She's able to play catch with her friends for the first time standing up, because previous to that, she would have been held by her dad with her hands. So as we think about this opportunity and the exciting professions that we're in right now and love so much, how do we help others to find us? Well, it has to start with the purpose of what we're doing and to tell them the why for us. And for us at Workplus, it's about helping organizations to grow that talent from within. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Richard. That's really interesting. And congratulations on the tomato and allotment analogy. I really enjoyed that one. And thanks also to Gareth for the presentation. And just remind people to continue to use the Q&A box as we just ask your questions to Gareth and Richard. And thanks to everybody who has been so far. It's been great to see the volume of questions coming through. So Gareth, I'll maybe go over to you first for the first question. So from UU Research, what are firms doing to attract staff and to fill vacancies at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. With the difficulties that businesses are facing, and I'll summarize this quickly, with the challenges that businesses are facing attracting talent, I suppose they're having to take a more strategic view. So there's part of it is, and it's about recognizing it's about more than salaries. Now, yes, listen, salaries are important, particularly when people's cost of living is increasing. But from an employer's point of view, it's about recognizing that it's not just about how much money they get paid, albeit that's important. One of the big things that we found that is good for both the staff and the employer is investment in training and development. So staff really like the fact of their employer investing in them, makes them feel valued. And obviously it's good for the employer as well. They get the benefit of a more highly skilled member of their team. And I think as well, one of the other things that many organizations are doing, perhaps not so much, this is already clear in sort of professional services, but in some other roles, it's about mapping out career pathways for people. And that's really important in terms of attracting people. So for example, I'm thinking here about in the likes of hospitality or retail, where a lot of those jobs might be seen as stepping stone jobs, but actually there is a career pathway for people to work in those sectors. And if you can show them that, then that's good for retaining staff that you already have rather than them leaving and going elsewhere. And it's also it's very useful for attracting more staff into the sector. So it's about trying to take a much wider view of what your current employees and potential employees want.
Great, Gareth, thank you. Richard, one's come through for you. So what are the main barriers for employers in the early career space, do you think?
Well, I think it's really knowing where to start. There's lots of information available online, and each training provider, whether it's Ulster University, Queen's, or FE colleges, will be promoting the work that they're doing. And NI Business Info is a useful resource, but it can just be very difficult for a business, especially with 98% of businesses here being less than 50 people, and just to have the ability to get the heads up and to be able to get their heads up from the job and actually to look outwards a bit. And it can be a challenge to do that. And again, that's part of the work that we're trying to do is to try and be that navigation service for employers around this early careers space. And it's an area that that we see, you know, is a huge opportunity to help people join in with the right qualifications and skills, and to really have a future here, and to stay, and to, as Gareth mentioned, you know, maybe attracting people in. I know it's a job for tourism and Invest NI as well. It's not just a skills issue, but it's one that we want to show people that there are amazing jobs here. And I think unearthing some of the companies out there, you know, so like 3 years ago, I didn't know about James Leckie Design, but you just see the impact that organization's having, and there are lots of businesses like that are in all sectors, and it's trying to find those businesses and then help them to tell their story and make them a bit more attractive. So that's the challenge.
Thanks, Richard. Let me stick with you for a second. One of the questions that come through is, do you see the apprenticeship model eventually replacing or reducing the demand for the traditional university model in the longer term?
Well, it's been encouraging to see it increase, and the number of higher level apprenticeships is over 1,000 per year starts now. But that's still a very small proportion of the net requirement from education and migration. Gareth, that's a term that you've taught me. Thank you very much for that. But I think it's about 25,000 people per year. So, you know, it's quite a small percentage of it all. But, you know, if we talk to anyone who's on their placement year, whether a graduate who's on their placement year or the employer, whenever they leave, they don't, you know, the student doesn't want to go back to university full time, and the employer doesn't want to let them leave. And I think even that's just a snapshot for us of how that, you know, you could call it pedagogy or whatever, but it's that rhythm of learning and applying. And 2 years in university, then a year out, and then a final year. You know, with the apprenticeship, it's every week that you're learning off the job and then applying on the job, and there's a sense of everyone getting better as a result. And we've even spoken with the lecturers who are delighted to have all this input from industry as well. So other countries have done this, you know, Austria, Germany, the Netherlands have really gone very far and deep. I'm not suggesting we can just transplant their model, but there's definitely something within it, and it's about giving people a reason to get up in the morning, to use their head and their hands. And any apprentices we talk to, their friends are jealous of them, and they're not missing out on full-time university. They don't have to get a part-time job to pay for their fees. They don't have to work at the weekends. They've got a great social life, and they're maybe starting on a salary of 19,000, and that grows very, very quickly because they're so valuable. So that's certainly a trend that we will definitely see continue, but it needs more employers to be involved. Only 9% of employers here hire apprentices. So it's how do we grow that percentage?
Yeah, challenge. Gareth, do you want to come in on that? I know you were going to answer something on that.
No, I was just going to be very brief. I can see, yeah, I mean, you can see the apprenticeship route increasing, but I see it working complementary or in partnership with higher education in the traditional degree route. So it's a coordination, cooperation thing rather than a competition issue. Would just be the brief point I would make on that.
Okay, thank you. I'll stick with you, Gareth, then for another question that's come through. What's the biggest challenge facing the skills ecosystem now? And maybe if you do have any comments on the PM's announcement on skills recently.
Thank you, Graham, for that question. I think well, as I see it, the two challenges. One, the main one, and Graham will be familiar with, is funding. The amount of funding that has been made available for skills development has fallen very significantly over the last decade, and the UK typically has a pretty poor record in terms of encouraging people who are currently in education, or sorry, who are currently in the labour market to stay in or to engage in training and development when they're in work. And Northern Ireland has a poor record when we compare to the rest of the UK. So I think it's critically important that we find a way that encourages employers, in the absence of government funding, that we find ways to encourage employers to continue to train and develop their staff.
Okay. I'll stick with you, Gareth, for another question there. I'm conscious that it's at the top of the hour, and hopefully people can hang on for a couple of minutes, and hopefully you're both okay. And if not, the recording will be made available for anybody that's missed their question being answered. One question, just interested to hear if you have any views on what model in terms of independent careers advisors should be provided, and are conversations happening within government on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that is recognised, within government, and one of the challenges that we have around careers advice is young people tend to get their careers advice from teachers in school, and I am not being at all critical of school teachers and the advice that they give. I know for a fact that they do their best and they try hard. There is a lack of information for them, so I think there's work that needs done to give them information. But I think the other issue, when I say independent, one of the issues that perhaps we have around schools giving careers advice is schools have an incentive to retain particularly at 16, have an incentive to retain their pupils, a financial incentive, and in an environment where schools and education institutions generally are having to deal with serious funding constraints, that incentive can sometimes encourage such schools to hold on to pupils who'd be better served going elsewhere and pursuing a different route. The other thing is that there's no such thing as a careers teacher. There's a geography teacher, an English teacher, a PE teacher who is asked to provide careers advice to their pupils, and so that it's a bolt-on to their core role. I think that if we have professional careers advisors who are going into school to be able to provide that independent advice, and we do have some, so it's not like there aren't any. If there are professional careers advisors who are independent, who have access to the full range of information and all the pathways that are available, I think that's the direction we need to go on. Government recognises this and they're doing work on this, so I don't want to suggest that they're just sitting on their hands. They're not, but that's a journey. We're not at the destination yet.
All right, thanks, Gareth. Richard, there are two questions that are maybe sector specific, so I'm going to give you the two of them at the one time, and maybe you can answer the two together if that's okay. So first question, is funding available for apprenticeships in public sector organisations, specifically for professional services like IT and finance in schools? And then the second question is, are you aware of any apprenticeships for training individuals in cloud accounting, which is obviously more relevant for this group of people?
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and thanks for the question as well. Currently, there are no fully funded apprenticeships within the public sector. Some public sector organisations within, say, CPD have got a procurement and supply apprenticeship, and some aspects of the public sector use IT apprenticeships as well, I understand. But the off-the-job training costs to the training provider, whether that's Ulster Uni, Belfast Met, etc., has to be paid for from the budget within that department that's actually employing the apprentice. And also you don't save on the Class 1 national insurance contributions, so it's a bit of a double whammy. But there is a policy which has been outlined by Department for the Economy, but it's yet to be fully funded and realised. And then on the other angle, the cloud accounting, there's nothing specific in that area, but I'm sure that it's a module within either the ATI programme or the degree level programme at Ulster University would have it within it.
Okay, thanks, Richard. That's great. Just in the interest of time, given that we've run 5 minutes over, and thanks to so many for sticking with us. So just want to check, Gareth and Richard, have you any final comments that you'd like to make just before we wrap up today's webinar?
No, just thank you, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you, Gareth and Richard, for joining us today and giving us two really interesting presentations, and also taking the time to answer the questions that came through. Thanks to everybody for asking the questions as they came through today. And I hope you enjoyed today's event. Please look out for any future events from Chartered Accountants in Business and also the Ulster Society more generally through the newsletter and the usual forms of communication. Thanks very much, everybody. The recording will be made available in due course for people to watch back, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.